Listeners, are you ready for a monthly literary adventure? Let me introduce you to the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book across a wide variety of genres. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live Bookish Flights interview. Can't make the live? Don't worry, we'll send you the recording. Our September book club selection is Darkness Calls the Tiger by Jennifer Trump, which is a World War II historical fiction novel set in Burma. Head over to the link in our show notes to learn more and see our upcoming 2024 BFF Book Club selections. Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Jennifer Blanchard. Jennifer is the self-made, best-selling author of F the How, Quantum Leap Your Life, and Manifest Everything, which are roadmaps for manifesting your dreams and desires without needing to know the how ahead of time. Her practical approach to intentional manifesting is doable and easy to understand. Jennifer has authored more than a dozen books, including several works of fiction, and is the co-author of a book, Miraclefesting, inspiring stories to help you recognize and create everyday miracles in your life. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Well, I feel like we are so much more than this bio. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are in your day-to-day life?
Who I am in my day-to-day life is pretty much a normal person. I don't live like a fancy life. I feel like when I look on the internet, everyone lives like such a fancy life. I feel like and like travels and does all these things. And I'm like, I'm home with my senior dog most days, just doing my writing, hanging out. I like to cook. I like to read. I love watching movies. Um, my boyfriend and I just bought a house on a 5-acre property at the end of last year. So we have a lot of stuff we're doing with that. And yeah, I indulge in hobbies. I spend a lot of time writing, and yeah, that's me.
It sounds very idyllic.
It didn't start off this way. I would say that I didn't start off this way. I started off in a corporate career doing a job that I didn't love, that I didn't want to be doing, but was doing because I quote unquote needed a job, right? Everyone needs a job after they graduate college.
Yeah.
Um, and just knew, I mean, I knew all along that I was eventually going to work for myself. That was always my dream and my goal from a very young age, especially knowing that I wanted to be an author. But it took a lot of work, courage, all of that to get to the point where I would actually be able to move into that life and transition into that type of life, because we're taught so many things like we can't work for ourselves and it's too hard and you won't be able to make money and all these things and especially about being a writer. Writers are broke and writers are struggling their whole lives, and you can't be an artist and be successful, and all this stuff that we get taught at a very young age about from society, and just things that people say that aren't even really true, but we just repeat stuff without even realizing that it's just a limiting belief that's been programmed in us. And it took me a long time to get over a lot of that stuff, but eventually I just realized I'm not going to be happy doing anything else, and I have to just make the leap. And so I did in 2012 officially, and it took a lot learning and figuring things out and stuff to get here, but it's been a journey, and of course the journey is still going. And it's definitely more idyllic now than it was in the beginning.
Yeah. I think about this often because as my kids have gotten older, I always think about what happened, right, to the creative hobbies. I think that a lot of us lost because we were told exactly the limited beliefs like you're talking about. And so I'm like, how, when I'm raising my children, do I not take that away from them, right? Like let them express themselves and let them continue down the path of whatever creative avenue that might be, and just trying to be more conscious of how I'm letting them do that in their lives so it doesn't stop that creative process.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a big deal. It's a huge deal because I feel like as kids, we know who we are, we know what we want to do. We are very in touch with that stuff. And then it gets sort of contaminated by the outside world and by other people's beliefs and other people's fears for us. And it's like someone telling me, writers are broke, they don't actually like want me to struggle as a writer or not be successful, but in their mind, they have so much fear that like
Yeah.
I won't be able to do it, or that it's not possible. And it's like they almost don't want you to dream big because they fear that if you don't make it happen, you're going to get disappointed and you're going to be like unhappy. And really I think it's the opposite. It's when you're not doing the stuff you want to be doing where you start feeling disappointed and unfulfilled. And even if you might not succeed right away with what you're trying to do creatively, if you're at least doing it, that changes everything. It makes you feel a certain way. It makes
Yeah.
you just show up in your life a different way. Like I can think about the times when I was really creative as a kid. It was in sort of my younger years before that, like high school and everybody's picking on you and suddenly being creative is not a cool thing to be. It's like, you're the outcast now and
Yeah,
you're the
you gotta
person that
fit
no one
in.
wants. Yeah, it's like now you just want to fit in. And so it's like I remember being like 11 years old and knowing I was going to be a writer. Like that was, and I was writing before that, but it's like at that age, I started writing short stories. I started really, really getting to reading books and like book series and stuff. And Nicholas Sparks had just started to make his books turn into movies. So he was like, that was the very beginning of that for him.
Yeah.
And so like I got to see that. And I, as a kid, and I just thought like, I want to do this. Like, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to write books. And I did at that time. I actually wrote a novella in 3 days. I don't know how
Wow.
I did this. I sat down and just banged this story out. It was like 120 pages. And it was just this like, or actually it was probably 60 pages, but if you double space it, becomes
Sure.
like
Yep.
120. But either way, it was like, I wrote this story. I was so excited about it. I even took a couple of writing classes. Like I am actually blessed to live in a place where we have this amazing writing school. And it's not like a college, it's like a adult education
Oh,
slash
cool.
like children's writing
So
school.
anyone can go then.
Anyone could go. Yeah, exactly.
That's
It's like
awesome.
continuing ed type of a thing. And so I took classes there and it was so great. But then you get a little older, 13, 14 comes, and suddenly it's like boys and school and this and all these things. And so you just get distracted away from it. And of course, being told things like, being a writer is not cool and it's never going to work out anyway. And whatever. So it pulls you away from it. But if you can just find yourself moments to like bring it back. So like just do something creative for a few minutes a day, every day, like just take some time, even if it's not with like a hobby, but maybe it's something like how you're thinking about something. Like, can you think about it in a more creative way?
Yeah.
Or if you're making food in the kitchen, like, can you put it on a pretty plate and make it look really nice like they do on TV? Like, can you just do something to use those creative juices? And if you start to do that, you'll notice that like you'll have more of it
Yeah.
as you go through your day, as you go through your life. And it just becomes a natural extension of like who you are because you've sort of nurtured it and nourished it a little bit along the way.
Well, I'm really glad you said that because that was going to be one of my follow-up questions for you is if you had any advice for the listeners who are maybe just starting their journey or maybe just recognizing that they aren't living maybe authentically to what they want, right? And they went into whatever job it was just to get a job, exactly your story. And they're maybe trying to find themselves now. They're recognizing that this isn't fulfilling them. And so they're trying to find that. And I'm so glad we're having you on the show because we have had a few episodes along the way that are kind of in this like lifestyle by design category. And it has been part of my journey too. And I think it's just so important for us all to have a moment to be able to express ourselves in this way, right? In this more authentic way. Um, so thank you for sharing this little
Yeah.
practical tip with us. Do you find that is it hard? Like once you're like, okay, so just try 5 minutes a day to do something creatively. Is it hard to kind of get the ball rolling?
So I would say it might be if you don't choose something like specific that you want to be trying to work on, or that you,
Okay.
because if you're just like, I'm just going to be creative in my day and just see what happens, then like it may feel a little bit more difficult because you're like, well, where do I do this? And how do I start using it? And you get in your head a little bit versus if you're like, I've always wanted to paint. I'm going to buy a paint set and I'm going to sit for 5 minutes every day and I'm just going to put some paint on a page and see what happens.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, I've always wanted to write a book. So I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes a day and I'm going to just jot down some ideas or write out some character notes or just something. It's like if you have some sort of creative either project or just something you're interested in, what I call test driving. So basically like I wanted to learn pottery because I've always been interested. I buy tons of pottery. Like if you come to my house, you'll see pottery just everywhere. My
Okay.
kitchen is just overflowing with pottery. I love it. Handmade pottery, most especially, is my favorite. And I've always wanted to make it. And I actually had tried a couple times in like school, just like, in classes, they make you make like some pottery and stuff,
Yeah.
and it's fun. And I always knew I wanted to do more with that, but I just haven't had the time or the space. And so finally last year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to take a class. And it's like, I had no clue if I was going to enjoy this, if it was going to work for me, if I was going to be any good at it. But I was just like, I'm going to take a class. And so I signed up for this class, went, started going through everything, and realized I'm actually pretty good at this. And I really enjoy it. And it's a lot of fun for me. And it was a test drive that went really well. So now I'm like thinking, okay, I'm going to build a pottery studio in my house at some point. And like, that's going to be something I eventually take, further. So if you know you are interested in something, is there a way to test drive it? Is there something small you could do, even in a few minutes a day, to just either try it out or see if it's something you might like? Maybe just watch a video of someone doing it and see if like it sparks your interest, or if you're like, oh, that's how you do it. Oh, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
Like you can feel if something is pulling you toward it, and you're like, yes, I'm just interested in this. Like you think about it all the time. It just pops back in your mind a lot. And it's something where you just feel like, I would do that. I would love to try that. I would love. And those are the things that I feel like you're going to get the most creative joy from. And
Yeah.
so those are the things I would say, try that out, even for 5 minutes a day. Find a way to kind of squeeze it into your life in small bits. And when you start to do that, you'll enjoy it. And then you'll find ways to do it longer and more because you just want to.
Yeah. It's like that phrase of filling your cup, right? Like you'll be able to tell if this is for you or this is not for you, if it's draining you or it's filling you up.
Right, exactly. Or if it's something where you're just like an example that I talked about in one of my books is this guy that I know. He was like a reader of one of my, and this like blog I used to have, and he would comment all the time. And one of the comments he left one time, and I remember we had this conversation about it. He was saying he dreamed of having a houseboat his entire life. He lives in the Pacific Northwest. So like that's a lot of places where people have houseboats, and he's wanted one his whole life. So finally he retired and he was getting ready to like buy his houseboat, and he was so excited, and he goes and checks his houseboat out, literally gets on the boat. Within 3 minutes, he's throwing up over the side. And he's like, I just realized it didn't feel how I thought it was going to. I didn't like it. It was like I was seasick the whole time being on there. He's like, it was awful. And I dreamed about it my entire life. And now I'm doing it and I hate it. And I don't even want it anymore. And he's like, if I had just done what you're talking about here, which is test driving, and like if I had rented one for the weekend or like gone and just tried one out when I was younger, I would have known that this wasn't something that was actually for me. And I could have set it aside and gone for something else. But instead, he spent his whole life dreaming of this thing that he's going to do during retirement. And then retirement comes, and now he's like, oh, well, now what? Because what he thought he was going to do, he's not going to do. So it's just interesting that, if we can give ourselves permission a little bit sooner to try the things we're interested in, the little nudges, the little like, oh, I could do that, or oh, that would be fun. Those little things that you feel throughout your life, throughout your day, as you go through your day, those are the things to just try it out. Rent the houseboat for the weekend. See if you enjoy it. Like go stay at that place that you think you would love to live, like whatever it might be. And as you do that, you'll know this isn't for me. Like this is not what I was thinking, like, I don't know. I started a jewelry business because I thought I love jewelry. I love hand making jewelry. It's so fun. It's so cool. So, and this was many, many years ago. Okay. When I was still in my corporate jobs, I was doing this sort of like, I love making jewelry and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I was like, well, why don't I just start a jewelry business? And so I did. And it was fun for the first like couple of months because I was setting up a little show and I was making all my pieces and inviting all my friends. And it was really fun. But once that happened and people placed orders and I had to actually sit down and make the orders, I was like, this isn't as fun as it used to be. It's more fun to just make it on the fly or like as a gift for somebody. Yeah. But I didn't really love doing it when I had to force myself to sit down and do it. It was like, no. And right away I could throw that aside. And that was something I thought about for years. And then I could now go, okay, well, I tried it. It's not for me. I'll just continue making jewelry for myself if I want to, or for gifts, but I don't have to do it as a business. Yeah. And now I can set that aside and try something else.
Yeah. What a great, like, I love exactly what you're saying of the test driving to check it out. And I think that what keeps coming up in my mind is, I'm a busy mom of 3. And sometimes to go do these like exploration, let's say, or to go like, it feels frivolous because my time is so plotted out right at this point in my life. But we talked about this in episode 74 with, her name is Erin Bartles, and she talked about giving yourself permission to try these things that you don't have to make money doing it. You don't have to quote unquote be productive while doing it, but to really allow yourselves, and she talked a lot about painting in the episode, but just whatever your creative avenue is going to be, that giving yourself permission that it doesn't have to be for making money and it doesn't have to be for being productive. Like letting go of that.
And it can be hard if you are someone who has sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, because that was my thing, was that every time I do something, I always want to figure out how to make money from it. Oh, like, how could I make money from this?
Yeah.
This could be a business. Like, I'm in my pottery class in my head going, this could be a business. I'm inventing the logo and the name. And it's like, and yeah, maybe one day it will be, but it's like, I had to stop myself, because you're right. Like, sometimes we get caught up in like, if this doesn't have a purpose beyond just me and doing it for the sake of it, then I shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, because what happens is when you do the things just for the sake of it, because you want to do it, it fills you up with this feeling you can't get anywhere else. And then that spills out into everything else around you and your life, and the people that you take care of and all the things and the other activities you have to do. You know, it just sort of becomes an overflow, versus the opposite way, where it's like, you know, you want to be doing this thing, but you just don't let yourself because you don't have time and you're busy and blah, 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 all the things. And then you're resentful of all the stuff you have to do. And you are miserable every day because you're like, everything is getting put before the thing I know I want to be doing for myself. And it just becomes this like cycle of going against what you actually want to be doing. When if you just gave yourself that time, even for 5 minutes a day, it will change how you feel, which will change everything else about the day.
Yeah. And 5 minutes can be so simple. And I think we all can find 5 minutes, right? Like, oh, okay, just put down the phone and not scroll for 5 minutes. And you can find 5 minutes of time. And so I think that's really, if you really are like, not hard on yourself, but really take a critical look at how you're spending your time in your day, I'm sure you can find 5 minutes to try
100,
this.
100%. I feel like no matter how busy you are, there's always pockets of time where you know you're wasting time, like scrolling on your phone.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm checking emails for 3 hours. Really? You're checking email for 3 hours? Like, you could have done something else. You know, you could have you could have been on your phone. You could have been painting or drawing or doing whatever you want to be doing. Instead, you're scrolling mindlessly, or you're watching TV shows you've seen a million times, and it's just like you're just watching it because you don't know what else to do, or you don't want to. Yeah, so it's like,
Yeah, I think having it like conveniently located, I always say this with reading too, is having books nearby where you know you have these pockets of time. Like for instance, moms, right? If you're sitting feeding your baby, have a book on your end table where you're sitting and feeding your baby, and then that way maybe you're more likely to pick up the phone versus a book. Or I have a book like by the kitchen when I'm standing cooking. And if my kids are outside playing, it's like, okay, maybe I can sneak 5 minutes to read while I'm watching whatever pot, I'm trying to cook.
or like you're going places. Let's say you go to the doctor's office, you're sitting around waiting, instead of being on your phone, you could be reading your book.
Yeah. Yeah. Just always have it in close proximity, and whatever that task or hobby is going to be for you, having it easy access for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I know sometimes that can be hard. Like if you're a painter, you can't carry, your whole paint set around. But I have seen people that buy these little mini paint kits, and it's like, it has, like a watercolor and like a paintbrush, and you can just do it on the go, or buy some markers or something. So it's like, you can always be doing something, even if it's not maybe the full blown thing that you want to be doing. I can't always be sitting at my computer working on a book, but I can be making notes on my phone. I can be typing up ideas for things, or brainstorming, or reading things that are going to help me learn more to actually go do that thing better.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is a perfect transition because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your books. So you have 3 books out, and
actually 17.
17, I'm sorry, but the 3 we read, the 3 titles we put in the bio. I'm sorry.
I have 3 manifesting books that I feel like are my actual books, that my books are supposed to be.
Okay.
But I have other writing, people who want to be writers, I have books to help them. I also have fiction.
Okay. All right. So if there's someone listening that maybe wants to dig in a little deeper, I feel like which book would you have them start with?
So I would recommend starting with F the How, which is really for someone who is either new to manifestation or new to creating things that they want to have in their lives. Or if you've been doing it for a little while, but you feel like it's not working, you don't know how to make it work, or you're struggling to make it work. That was the book that I would start with. I feel like if anyone could take a book that I have and like hand it to me back in 2008, when I started my whole journey of like being a professional writer, and really I was doing it before that, but what I call being a professional writer, because that was when I officially wrote my very first novel and like made my stake in the ground of like, I'm going to do this for real. Okay. But if someone had handed me that book back then, it would have changed everything, because I had just been introduced to the idea of manifestation through the movie The Secret. I knew nothing about how to make it work. I was trying different things and was very interested in it and thought it was a cool idea, but I just was confused at how to actually use it. And if I had had F the How, it would have changed a lot, because it not only would have explained to me how to use it, but I also would have started kind of understand more about actually getting my creative projects out there and actually doing the things I want to do. Because I think for a long time, and this is probably true for most people, we get caught up on how we're going to do something. We worry about how is it going to happen, and how, especially if it's like a creative dream where you're like, how am I going to publish a book, or how am I going to have this happen? It can be that thing that stops you from going forward and like taking any action, because you're like, I don't know what to do.
It just seems overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. And it can seem extremely overwhelming. And that book will really help with that stuff too, is to help you realize that like the how doesn't actually matter. If you can set that part aside and just do what I call your part in the manifestation process, and let the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call the other entity that is involved in this process, you can let it do its part, because it has a part just like you do, but its part is more energetic. It's not physical. Your part is more physical. So you're the one doing the physical actions and things. And the energy part is what's sending you the ideas and the nudges and aligning things up. And, oh, you just happen to be at a place at the exact same time as someone who needed what it's like what lines up the timing and the energy and all of that. And you're working with it. When you can set the how aside, it's a lot easier to work with it, because you're not trying to micromanage and you're not trying to figure things out. You're just doing what your part is and letting the universe do what it needs to do to line the things up for it to come through fruition for you.
Yeah. And I imagine this is something you have to continually do. Like you have to be like, just, I don't know. I'm totally new to this. So this would be where I would start with your books. But I'm imagining like even now you could still have these like things crop up in your mind that could stop you, right? And you're like, nope, I just need to do the physical activity of what I'm doing, like my part in this, and like let all that fade away. Or does that kind of change as you're more comfortable with this process?
Well, I would say you become more trusting.
Okay.
So you can surrender a lot easier. You can stop worrying so much about things. You start to trust more and believe more, because you recognize that like you're actually controlling a lot more than you think you are. Like our thoughts are really powerful, and whether we know it or not, so whether we've consciously come to the awareness of this or not, like we're still creating things with our mind all the time. It's constantly, it's been happening since the day we were born. And we are amazing manifestors as kids, especially because we don't have those barriers that we start to have as we grow up and learn things from the outside world and get tainted by other people's beliefs and thought systems and ways of being. And when that happens, we start to take on these, well, I'm afraid that I can't figure out how, so I'm not going to do it. Or it's too overwhelming, or it's too scary, or it's too whatever. As a kid, you don't think that way. You're just like, I want to go paint, and you just go paint. You're not worried like, is this going to make me money? Is this something that's going to be interesting to someone? Is an art director going to call this actual art, or are they going to call it garbage? Like, and it's like, you don't worry about that stuff. You just go do it. Like I was just writing my books at 11, 12 years old and not worrying about anything, and now it's like, and I've had to, take this out, but it's like, you have to work through that, like fear and all the beliefs that you've been taught and all the things that get layered on as you become an adult. So, but you're always creating with your mind. So if you can become aware of that, then you can start to direct your thoughts and your focus where you actually want it to go. So rather than focusing on the fear, the worry that this won't work out, how am I going to do this? It's the focus on, I'm going to take the first step I can think of, and I'm going to trust that the next step will unfold as I do that. And like, I'm going to keep taking action, even when it's not a full, clear picture to me where I'm going yet and like what the purpose of this is. I'm going to do it because it feels good. I'm going to do it because I want to do it and it's enjoyable to me. And it adds something to my life to do this. And as you focus on that type of thing, you're going to notice way more things start working out for you. Way more things start showing up that you actually want to have happening, because you're now focused on the good things, on the things that are working versus always worrying because again, you're not going to ever be 100% focused on positive, good. Like this is not about like toxic positivity. This is about knowing that you always have a choice. So yes, you might have negative things happening. Yes, whatever, you deal with that stuff as much as you need to. And then you set it aside and you don't stress about it. You don't worry about it, and you don't let it be the main thing you focus on. You worry about, I'm going to focus on what's actually matters to me, what I actually want to create more of in my life. Because what you focus on expands, as they say. Sure, you've heard that before. So, and that's why, because we have this part of our brain, which is called the reticular activating system. So basically when you start to focus on something or think about something, you'll start to notice it more often. So like this happens a lot when people buy cars. So like you buy a certain car and suddenly you see that car everywhere. And you're like, what the heck? I just bought this car. No one had this car. And now suddenly everyone has this car. What's going on? Well, guess what? Those cars were there that entire time. Your brain was not focused on those cars being there because it had no reason to be. But then you bought this car, or you got interested in this car, and suddenly your brain's thinking about this car now. So now you're magnetizing to you other cars that are just like your car. And they were there all along, but you just weren't seeing them because that's not what you were focused on or what was actually something, that was going to be a notice to you. But now that you got this car, you start thinking about it, of course, you're going to see it everywhere.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for breaking this down for me because I really love what you're saying about how the more you do this, the more you'll trust, the more you surrender. Because I think that can be a really freeing way to live, to let that go. And I, admittedly, like this is a top manifestation is a topic that's really new to me. Like I've heard the term, I just have never read any books on it. So F the how that might be. Would you kind of call it like a beginner's roadmap a little bit to kind of start you in this thinking like this or to understand it?
Yes, I think it
Okay.
is for sure. I also think someone who is already understanding some of this could still benefit from it
Okay.
because it does have a lot of nuance in there about like just different ways of like tweaking how you maybe have been doing something previously. So like
Okay.
if you've been visualizing previously maybe, but it hasn't been working, maybe there's little tweaks in there that this book can show you that will help it work better. And there's actually an entire chapter on troubleshooting your manifestations. So like if you've been trying to manifest something and it hasn't been working, you can go to that chapter and I've given you a whole bunch of reasons why it might not be working and then what you could possibly do to fix
Awesome.
it. So if you are advanced, that would still be useful to you, even if
Yeah.
you maybe know a little bit about this. So the first chapter kind of gives like an overview of just what manifestation is and all of that, so that when you get into the rest of the book, you kind of have a foundation to begin with. So it's definitely a good place to start and a beginner roadmap for sure, but also something that an advanced person could still benefit from.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Listeners, I'll have links in the show so you can go check out her books. And so you can find that all there. If you're driving, you don't need to worry about writing that down. There'll be links in the show. What is something that you've learned about yourself through writing?
Oh my gosh, everything. I've learned everything about myself through writing. Writing is literally how I figure myself out. Is like I write
Okay.
things down. I'm constantly making notes, writing things down, like just little ideas or things that come to me, or just a random line that comes to me, or a thought. Or I'm always doing that. I'm always journaling on things or thinking about different things. Writing stories, writing new books, like all the different ways that I can be writing. Facebook posts, but blog posts,
Sure.
it's like doing that is how I figure out my life. It's how I make sense of things. It's how I understand the meaning I'm going to put behind something. Like that's how I do it. It's always through the writing. And it almost feels like it doesn't make sense to me sometimes until I write it down. And then I'm like, oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, so yeah, I would say I learned everything pretty
Okay.
much. I mean, not everything, but you know what I'm saying? It's like I made sense of everything I did learn through the writing.
Yeah. Well, and out of your 17 books that you've written, did you have a favorite one that you've written?
Oh gosh. Yeah. So I would say, I mean, I love all my books, obviously,
Yeah.
but if you're talking, I'm going to go both. I'm talking nonfiction. I would definitely say F the How is my favorite. Um, it's the story of how I manifested my divorce, which was something I never ever imagined would be possible. And it was like, if I can manifest this, I will fully believe that I can do anything.
Yeah.
And I don't just share, I share the story of that, but how to apply the principle of what I did to all the different
Sure.
goals and dreams and things that you have. So I also talk about manifesting being a best-selling author and a lot of different things. So there's a lot of stuff in there. So I would say that's my favorite nonfiction. But honestly, my heart and soul is in writing fiction. So my favorite book right now would be my novel Soundcheck, which came out quite a while ago. But it's still a great story. And to this day, I'm just like so proud of it. And I know that that's my purpose on this planet more than anything else is to write fiction. So
Okay.
I do have another novel coming out this year as well.
Awesome. That was going to be my next question. Do you have any upcoming books or projects that you're working on? Can you tell us a little sneak peek about it?
Yeah, so it's I write romance,
Okay.
not like Harlequin romance, but like rom-com type romance.
Sure.
And I started the story that I'm working on now. It has some time travel. It's sort of a what do they call it? Supernatural romance. It's not anything I ever thought I would write, but the idea came to me and I just ran with it. And
Okay.
I'm in love with the story. I'm so excited about it and can't wait to get it out. But yeah, so it's a supernatural romance with some time travel and yeah.
Awesome. Well, keep us posted
Right
on
more in
that.
the coming months.
We'll be
So
interested to see it for sure.
when
Um,
this episode comes out, it'll only be a couple of months away from being out. So
yeah, yeah, I'll include it in the show notes. So make sure to keep me posted if you have more details. So Wonderful. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. So, what genres do you enjoy reading?
So growing up, I would only read fiction. In fact, when I was in college, I don't even know that I read more than a couple of pages in any of the textbooks I was assigned to because I literally physically would like, I would be in physical pain trying to read nonfiction. It was like, I couldn't handle it. It was, I didn't understand why people read it. It was like, why?
Yeah.
And then I was a couple of years out of college. I had just moved to another state with the person I was dating at the time. And I just remember thinking a lot more about writing a novel and like just reading more like magazines about writing books and stuff. And then I got this book. I think I was reading Writer's Digest, and there was a short article in there from this author. And at the bottom with his bio, it was like, blah, 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 here's his new book. And I was like, I'm going to go check that out. So I ended up buying the book. It was nonfiction. It's one of the first nonfictions I've ever purchased outside of like my college textbooks. And I just started reading this book about writing a book, writing a novel. And it was interesting and it kept my attention the whole time. And I got through the whole thing. And then I thought, wow, nonfiction isn't that bad if you just choose a topic that's actually interesting to you. And so I just started from there, I guess, and kind of reading the nonfiction. But fiction was always my thing before that. And I still read fiction now,
Sure.
not nearly as much because now I write way more fiction than I used to. So I try not to like taint my ideas with other people's. And
Yeah.
it's kind of especially when I'm working on a book, I try not to read any fiction just for that reason, because I'm like, I don't want to get someone else's stuff in with my stuff. I just want to
Sure.
do my stuff. But now I read, I mean, a ton of nonfiction, like tons of nonfiction, which is so funny because when I think back, I'm like, I couldn't have read a nonfiction book to save my life,
Yeah.
20 years ago. But now I'm like, it's the only thing I like to read. So, but I love to learn. So
Yeah.
it's not surprising.
Well, that's wonderful for you that you can just, okay, if I'm writing nonfiction, I'm going to focus on reading fiction, right? You can really switch gears that we have all of these choices we can choose from. So with reading, how do you find time in your day to do that?
Mostly just the pockets. So it's
Okay.
like I'll finish working on something and then I take a break. And so like during my break, I might eat something, I might read while I'm eating.
Okay.
Or in bed a lot of the times is where a lot of my reading gets done, like at night, because I'll go to bed like say an hour before I actually want to be sleeping. And
Sure.
then I'll sit in bed and read for that time. So those are probably the most times. The other thing is I have on my phone, I have my like Kindle app.
Yeah.
So when I'm somewhere else and I'm waiting in line or I'm doing something where it's going to be a while, I will just pull a book out and start reading it on my Kindle because I've got my phone there and I would rather do that than get sucked into social media. So not that I don't sometimes, but
No,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I try to like use those moments of squeezing the reading. But sometimes I will say if I find a book where I'm like, I just know I need to read this book, I will clear my schedule for the day and just sit down and read the book.
That
And
sounds
then that's it. It
delightful.
is what it is. I mean, I don't do that often because then things won't get done. But like sometimes I got to read this book. And I'm a pretty fast reader, so I can usually do it in a few hours anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sometimes I'm just like, I got to at least read until I feel like I have to stop or I can't go any further. It's like with nonfiction, sometimes I feel like some of those books can be too long. And so I sometimes don't get through all of them. It depends on the book. But like a lot of times I'll just read through the whole thing.
Yeah. I was just thinking about this last night, actually, about how books have this pull on us, like you're saying, where you're like, nope, I got to clear my schedule for this one. Or I had just bought a few books for my birthday a couple months back, and I have probably hundreds of books on my shelf, but those three that I bought myself for my birthday, I'm like, nope, I want to read those first. And I'm like, but they came in the mix later. Like I should be reading what else is there, but they just had this pull on me of like, nope, that's got to be the one I'm going to read right now. And I always say it at the end of our show. It's the quote at the end of the show of like, books come on our life when we most need them. And in my mind, I'm like, that book is what I needed at that moment. So I'm picking it up.
In fact, before I started writing the novel that I was just talking about, I was sort of I hadn't written a novel in a long time. So the novel that I mentioned before, I published in 2015. Between there, I've written some short stories, I've written some screenplays and stuff like that, but I hadn't written a full-blown novel. I'd written some novellas, like shorter
Okay.
novels, nothing full-blown. So I was sort of in this space of like, like, am I going to do this? Can I even do this anymore? Like, do I even know what I'm doing? Because I just thought I'm going to be a screenwriter. Like, that's what I'm going to do. I love writing short, like not writing a ton of stuff. And that was just more my jam. But then I was feeling called to this novel. So I actually ordered a box set of those after series novels. And I
Okay.
was like, okay, I'm just going to start reading these a little bit. I'm going to start reading these. Okay. So I don't know what happened, but I went into a vortex for about 4 days, maybe 5, where I was staying up till 2 a.m. reading these books. I could not put them down. I was the whole week I was just doing nothing. I couldn't stop reading these books. I just kept reading them, reading,
Yeah.
got through all of the books. And then I was like, and now I need to watch the movies. So then I watched the movies. But then after I did all of that, I was like, I can do this. I'm
Yeah.
going to do this. I just sat down and was like, like started writing this novel. So, yeah, sometimes it's, good inspo when you just get that pull and just let yourself go with it.
Yeah. And to your point earlier in the episode, right? Of like, just let everything else go. Just go with the pull that you're feeling. So, well,
Sure.
you have been so gracious to bring a book flight with you today. Can you tell us a little bit about how you chose these books?
Yes. So since we're talking about manifesting, I thought I would choose the books that helped me on my manifesting journey. The ones
Okay.
that sort of stood out to me as like, these are the ones that taught me a lot or changed a lot of my way of thinking or how I was doing things. So I brought those.
Awesome.
And then I brought another extra little bonus one that I feel like I'll share if we have time.
Okay. Awesome. Well, tell us the first book you brought today.
All right. So the first book is called E squared or E cubed. Excuse me. She does have one called E squared. This one is
Okay.
E cubed. So I picked up the second book here. Um, so this one's called E cubed, and it's by Pam Grout. I have it here, and it basically is what she calls energy experiments. And I'll actually just read what she calls her subtitle. So
Okay.
9 more energy experiments that prove manifesting magic and miracles is your full-time gig. So I read this book when I was with a group of other entrepreneurs
Okay.
who were all sort of wanting to learn more about how to create our lives on purpose and how to have more intention with what we're doing. And there was an entrepreneur we knew at the time who was really kind of growing her success, and we were all wanting to like figure out what she was doing.
Yeah.
So she sort of started this little group, and the book we were all reading was this book. And we actually went and did some of these experiments. And it was interesting because things started to happen, and the things she talked about in the book were actually happening. And it was like, oh, whoa. It was, I think, one of the first times I connected that I can do something either energetically, like with my mind and my choices of like how I'm thinking and the action, and that like that can create something. It was
Wow.
like one of the first times where I sort of made that connection with like the energetic and the physical kind of being connected, that there was two pieces to it.
Sure.
So that was what this book really did for me. And I think it's interesting too, if you are sort of new to manifesting, it's a good book to get because you can try it out. You can practice. She
Yeah.
literally gives you experiments in here to try out. So you can prove to yourself, this is a real thing. I can create with my mind. I can make decision and think about something, and I can move in that direction, and things will show up, and I actually manifest. And really, if you think about it and you look back on your life, you can notice times where like you wanted something and you made it happen. Right.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, maybe you took some action, but there was some energetic magic in there too, probably. And that's what this is it really proves to you that this is a real thing. And
Okay.
especially if you're someone who, like I was, very skeptical, very much like a doubter about things, was
Yeah.
raised very much to have like that, like, what is the thing? Knock on wood, like mentality of like something bad might happen. So like, I never believed anything good,
Sure.
really. It took me a long time to deprogram a lot of that stuff. So this book really helped with changing my thoughts about what's possible and what I can actually do.
Okay. And I like that there's the practical steps in there because I think for someone that's totally new to it, right? I think that's what we kind of need, right? Like, tell me what exactly I need to do, and then like you said, it'll prove to yourself that okay, there's some potential here.
Yes, exactly. Because I think if you are someone who's new to this, you may feel like, is this a real thing?
Yeah.
Is it going to work? And you do these are generic type experiments where it's like, I think one of them was like, you take a dollar bill and you like write a note on a post-it and stick it on there and like drop it in the world. So it's like a positive message to somebody, and they pick it up and they find it. And it's like, we don't even know what that can create. And there's all different things like that. And I read this book so long ago, I don't remember like all the little
Sure.
experiments. But and in fact, I think she has another one since this one that does the same thing, more energy experiments. But
Okay.
it's just fun, and I'm very practical. Like that's one thing. Even with my books that I write, everything has to be practical. It has to be. You have to be able to take what I've written and
Yeah.
use it in your life, and it has to have some sort of practical application, because that's how I think. Like I'm very creative, but I have almost a balance of my left and right brain. So like my right is a little bit stronger, but it's so close. Like I did this test once, I think it was like 51-49 or something.
Wow.
So it's like really close. So I'm very analytical. And that's why the practical kind of resonates for me, I think. And
Yeah.
that's what this book had in spades. So that's why I really liked it.
Okay, awesome. So that was E Cubed by Pam Grout. What's the next book you brought today?
The second book that I brought is The Desire Map, A Guide to Creating Goals with Soul by Danielle Laporte.
Okay.
Now, this one I love because it was one of the first times I ever realized that I could figure out an emotion that I wanted to experience and then match it up with things that actually caused me to feel that experience. And that is a huge part of manifesting. So manifesting, you have to feel as if the thing you want is already yours. You have to feel as if it's already who you are. You already own this thing. It's already yours, whatever it might be. It's like you're taking on the identity of the person who already has this thing. And a big part of that is feeling the emotional state that you believe you will feel having that thing. So if you want a car, let's say, when you have that, think about that car, what emotions come up for you? Well, I would feel joyful. I would feel excited. I would feel whatever, proud of myself. Well, those are emotional states you can create now before you even have the car. And as you create those emotional states, you're matching the emotional state you would have with having the car. And it's called matching the vibe, basically, or matching the frequency of the car. So now it can come to you because you're on the same frequency as it. You're matching it. So that's what this book introduced me to the idea of, is you don't have to just create random goals or things you think you want, because at the end of the day, you may not actually want what you think you want. What you want, what you're actually going for is the feeling you think that that's going to give you. Okay. So if you start with the feeling and then choose the goal from there, it will change everything. And maybe it'll still be the same goal, but at least now you'll be doing it with the intention of knowing that this is the feeling you're going for. Okay. So I just thought that was such a cool concept. I was like, that is a cool concept. Like, maybe I don't want what I think I do. Maybe I need to. So, and the cool thing about this book too, is it has a workbook in the back. So you can like go through the questions and actually do the stuff she's talking about. But I just remember when I read this book, and I actually read it myself, and then I joined a book club that we had locally that was reading it. Okay. And we went through it together as well. And it was just like, it was a lot of fun. I met some really cool people. And it just, I feel like this helped me to start to see that like feeling good can actually be not just a pipe dream, but something you actually experience in your daily life. And this book is what inspired me to do what I had in 2018 called my feel good experiment, which was that I committed that I was going to figure out how to feel good every single day for that entire year. And like, I didn't know what that meant or how it was going to look or what was going to be required of me. But I just decided it was time to learn how to feel good, because I didn't know how to do that. Most of the time I just felt bad or just not that great, because I was taught a lot of negative BS growing up about life and all these things. So I just had a lot of negative programming. My outlook about life was very negative. I just didn't, like, I was cynical. I was like doubtful about things. I always thought that like, if something seemed too easy, it probably was not actually what they're showing you. And like that people are probably lying about how they, and I was taught a lot of stuff like that. So it was hard for me to feel good, because when I did, I worried that something bad was going to happen, because I was taught that, right? Yeah. The other shoe is going to drop, or knock on wood. And so when I felt really good, or when something good happened to me, I would not enjoy it as much, because I worried that like something bad's going to happen and I shouldn't enjoy this right now because it's fleeting and it's not going to stay around. But I just didn't want to believe that anymore. And reading books like this made me see that like maybe I could feel differently. Maybe I could have a happier daily life existence. And so that, I think, was what inspired me to do this little experiment that I did for the year. And that year is what changed everything for me. I manifested my divorce, my entire life changed. Like I night and day difference within a year of that experiment starting. So from there, I feel like that's when I learned how to apply all this manifesting stuff in my own life. And I started to practice more. And I honestly know like the books that I've written now probably wouldn't exist right now without these books that I'm sharing here. Yeah. Because what I've learned, I didn't just learn, I took into my own life and I applied it. Used it, and I experimented and I kind of understood it for myself. And then it helped me to not only make things happen in my life and make the changes that I wanted, but like it helped me to be able to explain it so that I could help other people use it too. Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely a starting point, I feel like, for that.
Okay. And being an outsider, right, of like really knowing nothing of this world, I'm like, I literally never thought about like the emotional side of it, but I could see how that makes so much sense now that you explained it.
It's like, if you want to start your morning feeling happy, then what are the things that are going to do that for you? It's not going to be probably waking up and then first checking your phone and looking at your social media, right? Like if you think about it, Well, if I want to feel happy, what are the things that will align with that? Well, having a glass of water on my night table. So the second I wake up, I can drink some water. And then I get up and stretch. And then, I might open the blinds so I have some sunlight coming in. It's like just small little things you can do. Suddenly your morning is happier than it was when you just woke up and grabbed your phone and started looking at your emails, or looking at your social media and getting angry because you just tripped over the rug and stubbed your toe. And like now you're moving into the bathroom and worried that you're going to be late and all these things. It's like if you choose the emotional state first and then the actions that go with it, it becomes a lot easier to direct your daily life and like actually have the things you want and feel the way that you want to feel along the journey. Because really, that's the whole point anyway, right? No matter what you want, when you get there, it's not going to feel as amazing as you think because it's going to feel normal now for you to have that thing and you're going to want something else. So it's the in-between moments that you're really meant to be enjoying and really meant to be playing up. So if you can know the emotional state first, then you can create that for yourself in your daily life. And like I said, that's the starting point where I learned this is the Desire Map book. And then I have expanded it quite a bit for myself since then.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that one. That was one by Danielle Laporte. And then what's the next book you brought?
Okay. And then the next one is called Playing the Matrix, A Program for Living Deliberately and Creating Consciously by Mike Dooley. So this, if you're familiar with anything in manifestation, you've probably heard of the Notes from the Universe guy. If you haven't, the Notes from the Universe is an email that he sends out every day. It's a note written to you from the universe. And it's amazing how much those things will start to align. The messages will start to align with exactly where you're at in your life, no matter where you subscribe from. Because he's got, at this point, millions of subscribers. And he's just been doing this for over a decade, I think maybe even 20 years at this point. He's been doing it for a long time.
Okay.
But they're such fun emails to receive. And that's how I started with him was I got these emails and then I started reading his books. He's actually in The Secret movie. If you've seen The Secret movie, he's in that. But the reason I love this book, and this book I think changed a lot. This was the book where I finally realized the how didn't matter. Like he always said that. He always called it the cursed hows, he would say. The cursed hows. You don't need to worry about the how. It's not your responsibility. And I understood that to a point, but I didn't really get it. It was like, okay, yeah, the how doesn't matter. But it would still stop me from doing things. I still wouldn't, And so when this book came out, he put together sort of like a chart, I guess, where he explained like, what we actually want when we're manifesting. We want the happiness, we want the joy, we want the things that the emotional state, that's what we're actually going for. So those are the generic things that we want to manifest. And then there's all these specific things that we tie to that, like a certain car, a certain house, a certain job or income level or whatever it might be. And so he's like, it's not that you can't have those things, you can, but the problem is when you focus so much on the specifics, you get too caught up in the how. You get too worried about making it happen because you're like, well, how am I ever going to get that Range Rover that costs $100,000 and da-da-da-da, Yeah. Versus if you're just like, I just want to drive a car that every single day I feel so happy and grateful that I'm driving this car. It might be that Range Rover, but it might be something else that you don't even know about yet. And so by not worrying about the how, by not trying to, figure out all the specific things that you're going to manifest and just focus on what you actually want, which is happiness, peace, livelihood that you enjoy, like whatever it might be, then you're not as stressed out. And you can manifest easier and faster because you're not in the details. Because when you go with the specifics, well, for you to manifest that specific Range Rover, there may be a lot of things that have to happen in between you and that goal.
Yeah.
Or you can be like, my goal is to have a car that I love driving that's super fun to drive. Well, that could be a Jeep Wrangler that is available right now that you could buy tomorrow. And then you could have that experience now without having to wait for that specific Range Rover that you think you have to have. Yeah. So it's like by being more general, I think that was the thing I think with this was be more general versus specific. I think when I was learning about manifestation early on, I thought you have to be really specific. You have to know what you want and be really specific. Sure. And this helped me to see that actually by being more general, it's easier.
Yeah. I could see how even trying to be specific, you're like just beating yourself up of like why you can't figure out specifically what you want, right? So you're just continuing to limit yourself of like, well, I don't really know what I want, but I want to feel this is a lot different than, okay, exactly. I need to have X, Y, Z to feel that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this helped me to finally, I feel like, seal the deal on not worrying about the how as much. And I read this the same year that I was doing my feel good experiment, like I was saying. And so it just kind of all lined up perfectly to help me to figure out how to actually, because the thing is, we've always been manifesting, right? We're manifesting 24/7. We've been doing it since the day we were born. Most of the time, it's being unconscious, meaning you don't know you're doing it. It's
Sure.
just happening. But once I started to learn about this stuff, I started to look back and see that I had a process, that I've been doing this my entire life. I just didn't know what to call it. I didn't know how to explain it. And like by reading these books that I'm sharing here, it really helped me to understand that, because once I understood it, I could explain it to other people. And that's my gift, is being able to explain things that are sort of complicated in a very easy to understand way. And I used to think that was a really like, why is that my gift? But like, it just is. And now it's actually valuable to me
Yeah.
because I have a business where I help people and I teach them about manifestation, and, you know, but I wouldn't have been able to explain it as well as I do. And I wouldn't be able to help them as much as I can, not having read books like these, you know? So I feel like these are my starting point in my learning. And there was a lot of other books as well, but these are the ones that I felt stood out the most for that journey.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for bringing these today, because it could be, like I said, for the listeners maybe new to this could be a great way for them to dig in as well. Well, how I love to end our show here is with our bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions. Are you a rereader?
Yes, 100%. Maybe not every book, but yes, like I said, I've read Story Engineering probably 40 times, maybe more.
Okay.
And then certain novels I've read over and over again just because they're my favorite.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And then where is your favorite place to read?
Oh, probably the couch with a blanket or my bed.
Lovely. I love being cozy too. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
So I'm finishing up the novel, and once that is going to my editor at the end of this month, I have a plan to read this novel that I've had in my Kindle for, I think, almost a year now. It's called The Burnout by Sophie Kinsella.
Okay.
She's my favorite author. I love all her books. She is, I think, also what inspired me to want to write like romance, love stories, but like not just Harlequin, but like squeeze a love story into like a story about something else. So, so I have that. I will read that while my book is with my editor, so I can give myself a little bit of a break, and also a little bit of a confidence boost before I get back into. And I don't know why reading someone else's book would boost my confidence, but it just reminds me of like how a story gets put together and that I can do it. And so, so then when my book comes back from my editor, I'll be refreshed. I'll have read that novel and feeling really good about moving forward.
Yeah, you'll be ready to go. Well, and then last question here. If listeners want to contact you, how would they find you? Where do you want to send them?
So two best places, I would say my website, jenniferblanchard.net, or if you want to check out my books, dreamlifeorbust.com.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm on Instagram, The Feel Good Life. You can get me there, or I'm on TikTok, F the How, with F spelled out.
Okay.
So
okay. Well, I'll include all those links in the show notes as well, listeners. So you can just go click on those really easy, and you can go find Jennifer that way. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate all you've given me.
Absolutely. This was so fun. I just love talking about this stuff.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Jennifer Blanchard and her book flight of Manifest Your Dream Life. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are reading next, especially if you have heard about it on the show, please tag us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.